I'll just start by introducing myself then. I'm Sheryl Gross-Glasser. I work at the Community Transportation Association of America, and we go way beyond transit. We represent and provide technical assistance to not only transit systems, but let's say volunteer providers that take people to a grocery store or healthcare appointments and everything in between. We have planners who are members, we have human services organizations that are members all over the country, and we do a lot of work in rural and small urban areas, and I won't go into the federal definitions of those terms. And my background actually personally is in criminal defense work. I was a criminal defense attorney at the appellate level, so I definitely have much more of a social justice background and an awareness of how systems discriminate against people. And I'm, as of the other day, leading a new technical assistance center that does not yet have an official name or a website, but hopefully within the next couple of weeks that will be solved, and then we'll be putting lots of nice resources up there. Peter Norton is a professor at the University of Virginia, and basically he says the devil is in the details, and that's true not only, as you know, in engineering, but in terms of regulation and laws. And so what I look at is policy, laws, regulation as they relate to automated vehicles and shared use vehicles such as Uber, Lyft, microtransit like Via, and transit as well. And about a year ago, CTAA, well, basically me, we put out our principles in terms of automated vehicles. We have no engineers on staff. I can only say in my own defense that my family is full of engineers, so I know you all think very differently than I do. And our principles are accessibility for people with disabilities and older adults, equity, connectivity to rural areas, and of course safety. And I don't know an algorithm from a sensor, so obviously I'm not myself measuring safety. So what do we have today in terms of our transportation system? We have, in most places in the United States, a very automobile-centric transportation system that favors people with resources and money. There are some exceptions, you know, if you're in the middle of DC, for example, and you can get around on bus and metro, you have options even if you don't have a lot in the way of financial resources. But that's not really true in most places. So if you have a precarious financial situation and suddenly your car isn't working, or that person you carpool with to work or to school, their car isn't working, you know, your whole life can be upset. And if there's a healthcare crisis in the family, I know that kind of thing is covered a lot. Again, you're in a very precarious situation. And then if you're a person with a significant disability, you're even in a worse situation because you might not be able to get into any particular vehicle, even if you cannot drive. Or you might need considerable amount of personal assistance because you cannot see, or because your cognitive situation is such that you need a lot of assistance. So I am hoping and working on making sure that when we have automated vehicles, we have a much better transportation than this. I'm glad to see you shaking your head. Because right now, environmentally, in terms of public health, in terms of equity, we do not have a very effective or fair transportation system. So what is going on now? I'm going to go a little bit more into detail than our previous speaker, but not that much due to time, because I could talk for several hours. So there has been legislation introduced that wasn't passed last session of Congress that would regulate automated vehicles. There might be this session, although who knows, there's been some activity, and CTAA, along with other groups, has provided input as to what we think, you know, Congress should look at when they are regulating or drafting a law related to automated vehicles, and what agencies should oversee and how, and what should be included in all of that. That's very much up for debate. No matter what happens, if you have a federal law, there will be a preemption, meaning states won't be allowed to regulate certain aspects of that. Right now, we have a situation where Congress drafts the laws when it comes to the vehicles themselves, but when it comes to operations and licensing, liability, those are at the state level. So all those matters are actually in flux. The National Highway Transportation Safety Administration is currently very much encouraging innovation, but they are not actually putting any limits on that. And the voluntary self-assessments that companies that are engaging in this space, there's not any enforcement. What information are they providing, and how often? All those things are not being regulated, and that's really not a big change from the previous administration, but it does veer off a little bit more into more of a traditional Republican direction. So what are the states doing? The states are actually doing a lot. They're the laboratories of democracy in this space, and they are engaging in various levels. Many are just saying, we're going to study this, and the parameters of what they're studying varies a lot. Some are saying, come on in, operate, such as Arizona, Florida, Michigan, just come in and operate, you're totally legal. Others, like California, are putting a little bit more of some requirements there. Some say they're in the lead. Every state that is legislating in this space is saying that they're in the lead, but some are more encouraging than others, and some actually have requirements, like New York, where you need the state police involved. So the companies are not really encouraged to do any piloting or testing there. And then you have platooning, which is trucks. It could be intercity buses, but it's basically for the trucking industry, so that you can have, like a line of trucks all operating in a row. And even those laws actually differ quite a bit from state to state. And then there's a Uniform Law Commission that is very active on a whole bunch of issues, and they have a draft law that's in the process of being passed now. That just means it's passed by virtue of their organization, and then states could adopt that law, and it looks mostly at liability. So if you go to the website of the National Council for State Legislatures, and it might be state legislators, I always get it mixed up. Anyway, about every couple of months they update this, and they look at what states have passed any laws, and so it's a nice resource for that. And then there's lots of pilots going on across the country. This is not a complete list, but it gives you an idea that there's a lot going on. 5 minutes left. Oh my gosh. Okay, so I'll just rush through. Most of these are dog and pony shows. Some are real transportation being provided, like at the villages, or like the Rhode Island one is it's a 5-mile shuttle, so it's actually on a transit route and providing real service. Lots of planning going on. The Iowa City and the NACTO are very interesting documents. They're not plans in the terms of step-by-step, this is what we're going to do to get to automated vehicles. They're really looking at all the different issues involved in terms of land use and what has to be in place, and how we're going to encourage, people-friendly as opposed to automobile-friendly transportation in the future. Bloomberg is a great site. If you go to one place, this is the place to go. You can zero in on any one of these and get some information about testing, piloting, planning that's going on, and then even dive deeper. Many unknown variables. Lots of assumptions are being made that may turn out or not to be true. When you're talking about rural or less dense areas, are we going to change how we do land use so there's more co-location of destinations and walkability? Because as long as you have to take people door to door, you have an inefficient system, even if you don't have to pay a driver. And you're probably going to have unknown costs, which we're really not taking into account. And these are business models that either have in the past worked or are being very much discussed in terms of automated vehicles. And they reflect the times and circumstances in which they were created. Mobility as a service is a new one. The idea that you would have like this platform where all of your transportation choices are housed, and you can schedule rides, pay for rides, and how that looks is very much being discussed and debated right now. So in terms of older adults and people with disabilities, also lots of stuff going on. Since I have no time, I'll just let you read this and go very quickly. These are what the major older adults are looking at. Accessibility is very much a primary concern, and cost. In terms of the disability community, I'll say, I hope it stays in this room, but there's kind of a chip on their shoulder in terms of what we have and the past and the fights they've had to engage in to even get the results, the successes that they've had, and they still have so little in terms of what is available to their core constituency. And because there's so much poverty in the disability community, that's another factor. There is a universal design for full accessibility checklist when it comes to AVs, and it's very much in the weeds in terms of physical accessibility and human-machine interfaces. And then I just have a bunch of resources because I thought my PowerPoint would be available to you, so anything I've mentioned or alluded to is included in there, and I'm hoping that since I don't have a formal title yet with this newsletter, I just put in my email, that we're all sitting safely in those automated vehicles and not thinking about all the algorithms and other things that go into making them safe, that we can all just assume that we can have a safe ride because we're not thinking about the driver being distracted. Anyway, so lots of details. If there's any questions, I'm certainly available.
Hi, thank you for the talk. So I was wondering, from your perspective on the more social side of things, are there any particular ways that you see the potential of autonomous vehicles to kind of support equity and justice and all those, like really awesome things that you would like to see researchers really get behind? And also on the opposite side, are there any pitfalls that you can see where perhaps following the path of least resistance, autonomous vehicles actually play into inequities and injustices and stuff that you would like to see researchers resist?
Yes, well, I'll take the latter first, that kind of hell scenario, because once you have vehicles that don't need anyone inside, that are just going on their own to pick up kids or groceries or whatever, you can just be adding to congestion, and the cost of the vehicles, whether using them per trip or purchasing them, may be so high that you're actually rationing safety by how much in terms of financial resources people have. And so that's really what I'd like to avoid. So how can we encourage shared use transportation? How can we encourage land use that will make for efficient transportation and shared transportation, but also really looking into pedestrian, bike, zero emission mode safety, so that people can interact with these, but also interact with their communities in a way that's very safe and that doesn't favor one mode over another. Because automation only means that the vehicle is automated. It doesn't say what kind of vehicle or where and how it operates, or how much it costs to operate, or how much it costs to use that vehicle. So I hope that helps.
Thank you for a very nice talk. Now I'm going to try to be controversial.
Oh, please do.
In the early 80s, we did a system for an airport, whereby you will have vehicles which were autonomous. At that time, autonomous meant I put a cable on the road and I followed it. And they were 4, 8, and 12 passengers, and they were supposed to help the users go from one terminal to the other. So you go, you dial in, it comes up, picks you up, and takes you there. We are currently studying the extension of that to larger populations. So what we are running on is various problems. Problem number one, humans. Human-driven cars, everything that has to do with humans is the problem.
Yes.
Otherwise, we will have autonomous vehicles in the street right now.
Right.
Okay. Number two, Detroit. They don't like this sort of universal transportation system, all right, because of financial and other interests. And number three, the confidence of people into these kind of systems. So my proposal, and I even had a problem here with the University of Maryland, that other universities have done it, is I can establish a transportation system here with all electric vehicles, with 4, 8, 12, take away these stupid buses that if you actually calculate their occupancy is less than 10 to 15%, okay? And provide it to the people here, even for a few hours as an experiment, whereby you want to go from anywhere to anywhere, and you call it, it comes, picks you up, and leaves you. I was not able to give permission. And here is the real question. This system, we know from systems engineering studies that it will work best than anything else, and it has to be free. And that answers many of your questions. Help me understand why we don't have any system like that more broadly than currently in the United States. There are systems like that in other countries, but not here.
There's the People Mover in Detroit. There's the Personal Rapid Transit in Morgantown, West Virginia.
I can whiteboard that out.
But they're they're very limited. The issue I see is that people won't trust a vehicle without a human in charge. I actually don't think that's going to be an issue. People made the transition to elevators without somebody in charge. People use subways where you don't even see who's in charge.
You fly in aircraft where 98% of the time
Right,
the system
right.
is an autopilot.
Exactly. So I don't see those as big issues. Whether we will come to a point where we say, okay, we're turning the switch on and we're not allowing any human-operated vehicles on the road after X date. I don't know whether that'll happen. I totally agree with you that we'd be much safer, much better off if we could have a completely automated system than a hybrid system.
How do we educate politicians and regulators to look into what we call the total cost of the system? Meaning how much time is wasted, how much energy is wasted, all the things you mentioned. And then compare systems, not just on their technical ability and safety, but also this total cost. Because if you do this analysis, which actually was done for the Bay Area transportation in '58. The answer was, give the dumb metro free.
I'm with you. You don't have to preach to me. I think
I'm not preaching you. How can you help us to educate people towards this direction?
One, if you're talking to politicians, make it as simple as possible and give them a definite roadmap. Who is going to actually regulate these spaces? Because they're going to pass a general law, but they're not day to day going to regulate something. So you have to know who's going to regulate it and what kind of funding is that particular agency going to get, so that the regulatory system the regulations will be enforced and they'll have some teeth. So that's one, as simple as possible and know where you're going with it. The other thing in terms of, yes, okay, totally fine. In terms of fare free, I'm with you. The environmental, the public health benefits are all there for transit. I won't even go into other ways that we subsidize our car-centric universe that dissuades people from taking transit. But fare free is one very effective way, and studies have shown that people will, there's big boosts in transit ridership when you go fare free. It doesn't correct for everything, but it helps.
All right, let's thank our speaker.